One of my favorite video games is Persona 4 Golden. It's a Japanese RPG murder mystery with turn-based combat that also incorporates something of a life simulator. And while there is a lot of supernatural action to deal with, the bulk of what you do in this game is manage the day-to-day events of your character's life. The places he goes, the order he does things in, who he spends time with, and how he reacts to them. This game is a literal 100 hours long, so you spend a good deal of time interacting with your character's circle of friends. The way the supporting cast is written, both in the main story and their optional individual side stories, makes good use of the game's length to make you really care about these characters and feel that the choices you make regarding them are important. The thing is, they aren't. Not all the time. The game is littered with instances of you being offered a list of responses to pick from that all ultimately lead you down the exact same path within the conversation. To the developer's credit, it's not something that's always apparent until your second playthrough, but it's there all the same. The game gives you the illusion of having an overabundance of choice coming at you from all sides all the time. Some of those choices are in fact genuine. Who's in your party, what they can do, whose side stories you explore, which relationships you level up, what magical creatures you add to your arsenal and what they're capable of. All of these things are totally up to you, as is every aspect of managing the limited amount of time you have to complete the game. The majority of gameplay beyond that is a fairly linear path through the story. It just feels like it isn't because there's so much going on and it's being presented in a way that makes you feel like you could mess up and miss something at any moment. So why is Persona 4 Golden still one of my favorite games? Why have I played it beginning to end 3 times, and why will I probably go back for a 4th? The answer comes down to writing and time. Like I said, you're going to spend 100 hours with these characters, and not only is the quality of writing high, its main focus is on getting you to care about them. Everyone you interact with is sympathetic, someone who's struggled with something that made them hate themselves on some level, and the further you explore those problems, the more you want to help them. You want to help Chie realize she's not worthless compared to other girls. You want to help Kanji see that he doesn't need to be ashamed of who he really is inside. You want to prove to Nanako that the father who never makes time for his 6-year-old daughter actually does love her. And because of how much time they have to get in-depth and personal, you're bound to find someone you relate to on your own level. My first time through, I gravitated towards Yukiko's story of feeling trapped living in the same small town and working at the same dead-end job forever with no end in sight, because at the time I was going through the same thing. But whether a specific character resonates with your own life experience or not, it's all about making the player emotionally invested in the characters and caring about what happens to them. So why is it that some games that rely on the illusion of choice fall apart while others don't? Let's take a look at Telltale's Walking Dead, a horror adventure game whose main mechanic is the player making choices to navigate the world and survive violent encounters with zombies and other humans. Just like Persona 4, Walking Dead is a game that relies heavily on the illusion of choice. Your actions can determine who lives and who dies in some cases, and poor judgment can earn you a game over in crucial moments, but the cracks are more apparent than they are in Persona. You get a lot more instances of characters responding to you with a sentence just generic enough to apply to any dialogue choice you might have made, and most of the time you're only in danger because you didn't press a button fast enough while being attacked, not because you chose incorrectly. Even when the game gives you what seems to be a massively important choice to make, and all the time in the world to think about it before you commit, it still only boils down to a cosmetic difference now and a few different lines of dialogue later. Still, that's not all that different from what we're given in Persona 4. So why do I keep going back to that game over and over again, but I'm left with no desire to play this one a second time? It's because while they both rely on the same gameplay gimmick, the two games are about two completely different things. And I don't mean their genres, themes, or stories, I mean what they use to hook you and keep you. Persona 4 and Walking Dead are comparable in terms of making you think you have the ability to make choices that matter when you actually don't most of the time. The difference is that Persona 4 lets that mechanic be just a mechanic, and brings your focus primarily on the characters. Whereas in Walking Dead, the star of the show is the choices. Now don't get me wrong, I like Lee, and Clementine may be the best kid in all of video games, but the characters in this game very blatantly take a back seat to the things happening around them. So much emphasis and focus is put on the need to survive, the idea that only your choices will let your group scrape by. You're told over and over again that your choices matter, that one or two big enough errors in judgment could make all the difference in the world. The idea that your choices matter is the entire foundation of this game, and the likability of characters like Lee and Clementine are primarily there to make you more anxious about making the right ones. You care about them in that general way of not wanting bad things to happen to them. And you're being told repeatedly that if something bad does happen to them, it's your fault. The game uses likable characters as a means to exploit basic emotions like fear so that you'll put more weight on the decisions you have to make. The characters are secondary to the choices they're meant to prop up. And once you realize that, the game doesn't really have much going for it anymore. So my big takeaway from all this is that limiting player choice while providing the illusion of much greater choice doesn't have to be a negative thing, even if the player realizes what's going on in the middle of the game. What makes or breaks a game like this is whether or not the game is compelling enough on other levels that it can survive even after the illusion is broken. The Walking Dead, in my opinion, cannot. Choice is what the entire game revolved around, and everything else in it was in service of that idea. Realizing the truth pulled the rug out from under the entire thing. Persona 4, in my opinion, thrives despite this shortcoming, because the choices you make are secondary to the rich developing characters. You stick with this game for 100 hours because you like the people in it. Everything else is icing on the cake. So when you realize that one of the mechanics isn't what you were led to believe, it doesn't seem like that big a deal, because that stopped being the thing that kept you coming back a long time ago. When was the last time a video game's story or characters really connected with you? Have you ever been afraid to commit to an in-game choice because of how invested you were? Tell me about it in the comments below, and thanks as always for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.